Today's lesson is on solving inequalities with the distributive property. As usual, there is a video guide to go along with this lesson. If you have not printed that video guide, go ahead and pause the video, print the video guide, and then come back so you can work out the examples with me. Now remember, for the distributive property, we learned about that when we were solving equations. It has to do with the parentheses, and the distributive property is always used with multiplication. All right, so to get rid of the parentheses, we use multiplication. We always multiply by the number in front of the parentheses, and that allows us to remove the parentheses and then solve the problem. So we're going to apply that concept today. So for number 1, we have negative 50 plus 10k is greater than 5 parentheses 5k plus 8. I always like to draw a line through my inequality sign so I can see the two sides clearly. Now if I look at the left-hand side of the inequality, negative 50 plus 10k, there's nothing that can be simplified. But if I look at the right-hand side, I've got those parentheses there that I need to get rid of. So my left side is going to stay the same. Negative 50 plus 10k is greater than. On the right-hand side, I'm going to use the distributive property to get rid of those parentheses. So I'm going to multiply by the 5 that's outside of the parentheses. So I have 5 times 5k gives me 25k, and 5 times 8 gives me a positive 40. Now that the parentheses are gone, we're back to an inequality that has variables on both sides. So that first step is the only part that's different. After that, the steps are the same as what we've learned before. So what we need to do is get those letters on the left-hand side. All right, so I want to cancel out that 25k. To cancel out a positive 25k, we just do the opposite. We subtract 25k on both sides, minus 25k. My negative 50 stays the same. Now 10k minus 25k. All right, the signs are different. I do subtract. That gives me 15k, and I keep the sign of the bigger number, so it's negative 15k. Is greater than, keep your inequality sign the same, and your 40 just comes down. Once the letters are on the left-hand side of the inequality, we want to move the numbers over to the right-hand side. So to do that, I want to cancel out that negative 50. So the opposite would be positive or plus 50 on both sides. My 50s would cancel. The negative 15k just comes down. So does my greater than sign. 40 plus 50 is 90. At this point, our last step is just the division. So I need to divide both sides by negative 15. On the left side, my negative 15s cancel. I'm left with k. If you divide both sides by a negative, remember the rules for inequality tells us to flip the inequality sign. So instead of a greater than sign, I need to put a less than sign. And then 90 divided by negative 15 is negative 6. So our solution for number 1 is k has to be less than negative 6. For problem number 2, we have 10 and then parentheses, x plus 8, is greater than 20 plus 4x. I'm going to draw my line through the inequality sign. You need to get rid of those parentheses first. Okay, so to get rid of the parentheses, they're right here on the left-hand side, you're going to multiply by the number outside of the parentheses. So I'm going to multiply by that 10. Remember, this is a 1x, they just don't write the 1. So we're going to take 10 times 1x, which gives me 10x. And 10 times the positive 8, so that's plus 80. Keep your inequality sign, so greater than sign. Okay, and then 20 plus 4x just drops down. Okay, at this time we are back to just an inequality with variables on both sides. So I want to get all of my x's over to the left-hand side. To do that, I need to cancel out the plus 4x. So the opposite would be subtract 4x on both sides. So 10x minus 4x gives me 6x. The plus 80 just comes down, is greater than, and the 20 comes down as well. My 4x's cancel out. Those are gone. 4 minus 4 is 0. At this point, I want all of my numbers on the right-hand side. Well, this 80 is not on the correct side. I want to go ahead and cancel that. So the opposite of plus 80 would be subtract 80. So I'm going to go ahead and subtract 80 on both sides. So they cancel. 6x drops down. So does my greater than sign. 20 minus 80. Okay, the signs are different, so I will subtract them. I get 60, and I keep the sign of the bigger number. We have one more step. I need to divide both sides by 6. So divide by 6 here and here. My 6's will cancel. I have my x that just comes down. Now my inequality sign, I will keep it the same because I divided both sides by a positive 6. That negative 60 is only on the right side. I divided both sides by a positive 6, so if it's positive, you keep your inequality the same. So it's greater than. Negative 60 divided by 6 is negative 10. So our solution for problem number 2 is x is greater than negative 10. For problem number 3, our inequality is 5 parentheses 2 plus 4r is less than 2 parentheses 10 plus 9r. Now you notice that we have 2 sets of parentheses this time, but the steps that we follow are still going to be the same. If you have 2 sets of parentheses, that just means you have to do the distributive property twice instead of just once. So taking a look at this problem, let's look at the left-hand side first. To get rid of our parentheses, we're going to multiply the front number of 5, just on this left-hand side. So 5 times 2 gives me 10, and 5 times 4r gives me positive 20r. Keep your inequality sign. On the right-hand side, we have a 2 in front of the parentheses, so I'm going to multiply by 2 on the right-hand side. So I'm going to multiply 2 times 10, which gives me 20, and then 2 times 9r, which gives me positive 18r. Once we've done the distributive property twice, it's now just an inequality with variables on both sides. So to solve this, I want to get my variables to the left side, so I'm going to cancel out that positive 18r. So to do that, I will subtract 18r from both sides. My 10 will just stay the same, so I'm going to bring that down. And then 20r minus 18r is a positive 2r. My inequality sign comes down, so does the 20, but my 18r's cancel, so those are gone. Now I need to cancel out my positive 10. To do that, I need to subtract 10. So I'm going to subtract 10 on both sides. 10 minus 10 is 0, so my 10's cancel. And we get 2r, just comes down, is less than 20 minus 10 is 10. And then our last step is almost always division. So I'm going to divide both sides by 2. Divide here and here. So my 2's will cancel, and I get r is less than. Now I keep my inequality sign the same because I divided both sides by a positive amount. Only flip the inequality sign if you divide by negative. And then 10 divided by 2 is 5. So r is less than 5 is our answer for problem number 3. For problem 4, we have negative 6 parentheses b minus 2 is less than negative parentheses 5b plus 1. Again, we have 2 sets of parentheses, so that just means we'll do the distributive property twice. So draw our line through the inequality sign. On the left-hand side, the negative 6 is outside of the parentheses, so I'm going to multiply both sides by negative 6. So negative 6 times b gives me negative 6b, and negative 6 times negative 2 is positive 12. My inequality sign stays the same. Now, on this side, all I have is a negative sign outside of the parentheses. But remember, anytime you're missing that number, there is a 1 there. They just don't write it. So I'm going to go ahead and write the 1 so I don't forget. So I'm actually multiplying the right-hand side by a negative 1. And I'm going to make sure I multiply both terms. So So negative 1 times 5b is negative 5b, and negative 1 times 1 is negative 1. Now I just need to get my letters on the same side, so I'm going to cancel out the negative 5b. So to do that, I'm going to use positive 5b or plus 5b on both sides. So negative 6b and positive 5b, that gives me negative 1b. The plus 12 just comes down, so does my inequality sign. The 5b's cancel and my negative 1 just comes down. Now that my letters are together, I want to get my numbers together. So I need to cancel out that plus 12. So I need to do the opposite, which would be subtract 12 on both sides. So 12 minus 12 is 0. Those cancel. I get negative 1b is less than negative 1 and negative 12. I'm actually going to add those. I'll get negative 13. We add them because the signs are the same. And then our last step is to divide by that negative 1. So I'll divide both sides by negative 1. They cancel, and I get b is greater than. Now I flipped the inequality sign this time because I divided both sides by a negative 1. So because both sides were divided by a negative amount, I flip the inequality, and then I do my division. Negative 13 divided by negative 1 is positive 13. So b is greater than 13 is my solution for number 4. At this time, go ahead and pause the video, try problem numbers 5 and 6, and then come back and check your work with mine. For problem number 5, the inequality was 2 parentheses negative 8n minus 10 is less than or equal to negative 41 plus 5n. So the first thing that I did was use the distributive property, multiply by 2. I got negative 16n minus 20 is less than or equal to, I did not change the right-hand side because there was no parentheses, so there was nothing I needed to simplify. At that point, I canceled out the plus 5n by subtracting it to both sides. That gave me negative 21n, and it canceled out my 5n's here. And then I canceled out the minus 20, so I got my numbers on the right-hand side. So I added 20 to both sides. My 20's canceled. I was left with negative 21n is less than or equal to negative 41 plus 20 is also negative 21. And then my last step was to divide both sides by negative 21. So my solution was n is greater than or equal to 1. I did flip the inequality sign because I divided both sides by a negative. Anytime you divide both sides by a negative, you have to flip the inequality sign. For problem number 6, our inequality is negative 10 parentheses n minus 1 is less than 3 parentheses negative 3n plus 7. So the first thing I did was the distributive property on both sides of the inequality. I multiplied by negative 10 on the left side, so that left me with negative 10n plus 10 is less than. I multiplied by 3 on the right-hand side, so I got negative 9n plus 21. From there, I canceled out the negative 9n by adding it to both sides. I got negative 1n plus 10 is less than 21. After that, I canceled out the 10, so I had my numbers on the right-hand side. So I subtracted 10 from both sides. That left me with negative 1n is less than 11. And then my last step was to divide both sides by that negative 1. So I got n is greater than negative 11. Again, I flipped the inequality sign this time because I divided both sides by a negative amount. And that's the end of our lesson on inequalities with the distributive property.